AI literacy and responsible use isn't optional anymore. And I worry about the volume of that in the education space and then the lack of that education around its utility.
I feel particularly energized and excited and a little unknown about today's product management world.
It challenged me to think beyond building for users and instead focusing on building with them. The volume of products that are all AI driven. And what worried me about that was the speed and the potential harms.
We don't have to spend a lot of time on any problem. We can just build something.
So, what does that time saved give you?
Hello and welcome to Product Voices. I'm so excited about my conversation today. My guest is amazing, and I actually have had her on before on a podcast. And so we go way back, and I'm very excited to have her again. We're going to be talking about all things product management, AI, all the fun stuff that we know and love. And so it's going to be a really amazing conversation, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Amanda DiDio is Vice President of Partnerships at Optimistic Design and a strategic program leader with over a decade of experience advancing digital solutions and services across sectors. She's led complex cross-functional initiatives for organizations, including the Gates Foundation and Renaissance Learning. Amanda, thank you so much for being here with me today and having this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. It's a pleasure to be back. I'm excited to hop into this topic around product management and delivery, thoughts about human and equity centered design, and what that role plays into thinking about the impacts of AI.
I love it. Yeah, it's such an interesting time. I think we probably could say this at virtually any time in product management's history, but I feel particularly energized and excited and a little like unknown about today's product management world. And I think that's exciting. I think there's room for us to almost build it the way we want it to be. Not just, what it's always been. So I only gave a very brief bio of you, just to kind of, introduce you to the audience or the audience to you. But I often find a person's career and a person's career stops and the different things that they have experienced over their career and their lives has an impact and drives a bit of their point of view or their perspective on product and design and other things. And so we know what you do now. We know a little bit about your history, but tell us more about your career, your path, and maybe a little bit if some particular experiences have driven your overall point of view on product and design.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I started my career in program and product management consulting and primarily supporting clients across sectors, building web-based tools, mobile application, proprietary SaaS platforms, leading cross-functional teams through the traditional frameworks of product R&D. And I was introduced to systems thinking and human-centered design relatively recently in my career, and I was immediately drawn to how these frameworks could fundamentally sort of reimagine the traditional product development process. And it challenged me, I think, to think beyond building for users and instead focusing on building with them and elevating end user voice as a central, driver to product delivery. And I think that um, was a mindset shift for me and became the core catalyst to co-founding Optimistic Design, which is a design research and strategy practice where we are dedicated to helping organizations and product teams deliver against and understand how they can build their own capacity around understanding systems thinking and human-centered design frameworks and implementing that into the core of their work. It is, a slight different shift in how you think about building roadmaps, how you think about prioritizing research, and how you think about really understanding, the problem space. And We support our partners in how to intentionally embed co-creation and insights-led strategy, and sort of that inclusive part of designing a service or a product that really thinks thoughtfully about the users and the ecosystem of the stakeholders that their problem is serving. And I think that is sort of the heart of product development. And yeah, and I think it really has changed the way I view my role and the responsibility that I have as a product manager and a leader and sort of a part of that triad of product and design and sort of development and research. So yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love your background and optimistic design and kind of coming to fruition, I think is a great story. Um, and I think you're spot on in terms of, like, we should be doing all of this in product development. We should be centering the customer and the user, but it's hard. And I don't mean it's well, it's rare. Let's be honest, right? We don't There aren't enough organizations that truly co-create for sure and, even center the user. We think we do. We're doing some things here and there that may be beneficial, but we get so internally focused so quickly and so easily. It doesn't mean that we do everything wrong, but it's very difficult to have that kind of mindset in an organization. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about specifically, like, what is systems design? What is like, how does an organization, and we're taking us back to the basics here, but what does that mean to an organization? So folks out there listening that don't really know what that means or don't really embed that yet, or at least knowingly embed that. Tell me more about that. Like, tell me more about how organizations use that and what that looks like in a product team.
Yeah, I think there's small shifts to thinking about the traditional R&D process where you define the problem, and usually that is either a business-led problem because there's a gap in the market of your product, or it could be customer feedback that comes in. And so you sort of define the problem. You might do some research around, what is that problem from the user perspective. You jump into designing, you prototype, you shift that into a PRD, and you start delivering against development, and then you might test again and you release. And I think that's worked, and it's worked for organizations who are able to sort of move through to be able to deliver something fast. But I think what tends to happen is you start to release features that haven't actually been really thought about where that actual problem sits. And are we just acutely solving a problem, or are we actually looking at a root cause of where that might sit within your product? And a lot of times what happens is you accrue tech debt. And then the product becomes really loaded instead of thoughtfully and taking a little bit more time to really understand, where does this problem sit within the larger ecosystem of our product? And again, are we actually acutely solving the problem? And I think the small shifts that we usually guide teams who are like, I don't know where to start or how to rethink our process is to expand that R&D cycle a little bit further. So spend more time in the initial define and discovery by doing some secondary research, actually talking to end users through qualitative interviews, and doing some quantitative data collection, synthesizing that and reflecting it back. Is this right? What we heard correctly from you? Help us prioritize what the most important thing is. That doesn't absolve you from thinking about your business stakeholders. What are your business stakeholders' priorities amongst what your end users have said and what they prioritize? And then that's the fun part of the collaboration and making those trade-offs. As you start to then move that prioritization or opportunity ideation space with end users, continue to involve them in that process. Generative design, conceptual design, and bringing end users into that fold, it doesn't need to be an elaborate process. These are sprint based. Integrate that into your sprint. There's many different tools out there that can help you do that rapidly. There's also different modalities of research that we've used that are easy and pretty fun to spin up. Collaborative workshops. We use Miro. We use things like color coding and prioritizing, where our users are starting to get bought in. They have agency in the process. They become ambassadors and want to continue to engage. So you're not sort of defining the problem, developing something, prototyping, and then testing it. You're continuing to validate and prioritize along the way so that by the time you release, you've already done a lot of that work to then set yourself up to continue to test what's next once it's live, once it's launched. So fundamentally, it's finding the moments that are available to you to start earlier on in your process to engage end users. And they do not need to be massive shifts to your process. They could be the smaller moments where you're bringing them and spending another week of doing more qualitative interviews, spending another week doing some ideation and testing. Start there and then open up your repertoire of modality of testing and think creatively about what that could look like. And I think bringing a systems thinking lens is really understanding that root cause, right? It's really thinking about are we are we solving an acute problem or are we looking at all of the factors in which could be underlying to where a problem might sit? And it could include the user or it could include the ecosystem of what is around that user that could be impacting the way that they're using your product. And so what I love is walking into a team who's like, "I have no idea what systems thinking is," and walking them through some ways of understanding and doing iceberg analyses or, thinking about problem and cause, reaction and mappings, through some different workshops and exercises, and it soon becomes a realization of, "Oh, wow. We thought we were prioritizing the right problem, and it turns out we weren't at all." And so it's an elimination and it does take time and practice and a little bit of a mindset shift in your organization or your team, but I think it can start in the small moments.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's important what you mentioned about it, how it doesn't, it doesn't have to be this entire shift of the process, and it can start in those smaller moments. I love the way you say that because I think people get scared of change, and in product, everything's always dynamic. Like we never get there, whatever wherever there is. Like we're always learning, we're always changing, we're always doing something. Our customers' needs are always changing, and so it can get overwhelming. And so just the thought of even when intrinsically we know it's the right thing for us, it can get difficult to change the way we do things. So I think that's really kind of a practical way to think about that. So you can't have any conversation these days without this. So tell me about AI and what you're hearing from clients. And, it changes weekly, daily. Like I love keeping up with it. But what are you hearing in the real world of product teams making products, trying to do things very system thinking, very human centered? And allow AI to help them with that. What trends or conversations are you having and seeing out there?
Yeah, we've been really steeped in the education landscape over the last few years, and we're sort of at an interesting spot where our client portfolio sits on two different bookends. We have clients that are social impact funders who are looking to fund momentum and movement into integrating AI, doing more research around AI, and supporting their grantees on their path to integrating AI into ed tech products. We also work with ed tech organizations who are integrating AI into their courseware, their curriculum, into the pedagogical practices to support teachers. And so we're sort of seeing this ecosystem of how AI is being viewed, how to research it, how to implement it. And so it's an interesting spot to be in as a design research consultancy to sort of look at the variety of problems that both of these sorts of players are facing. And I think when I had a moment, I attended a conference in education, one of the largest education conference in the country called ACGSB. And what I was struck by was the volume of products that are all AI driven and how quickly. I mean, I was just there and these conversations happened a couple of years ago. Everybody was and what worried me about that was the speed and the potential harms, especially with these, AI LLM driven models that are not actually built and trained equitably, and I think the speed of that could either close or widen a biased gap. And I was a little bit unnerved by that. And 2 things stuck out to me from leaving there that I thought were like not aha moments, but just reinforce the things that we like to reinforce when we're working with those bookends of clients we have. Um, AI literacy and responsible use is it just isn't optional anymore, and I think it's becoming, kind of a new pillar of a digital citizenship. And I think as fast as we are integrating and building AI, especially and talk about the education landscape, but I think across sectors, the conversation about education for how to the utility of it, the discernment of using it, and especially with students, families, and caregivers, the way it should be integrated in students' life and the way to teach students now and any young person today around its utility and its harms. And I worry about the volume of that in the education space and in the courseware and the curriculum and the inundation of it just becoming a digital first experience, right? And then the lack of that education around its utility. And so that definitely stuck out to me. And the other is kind of this co-creation and testing of the thoughtful integration and build of AI solutions. So I think the rush to integrate open source LLMs without thoughtful design, without the continuous iteration, without the input from diverse perspectives, and actually subject matter expertise within the space to correctly train a model can cause misalignment and harm. And I think there is not a lot of transparency in products, at least that I'm using, to know what are sort of LLM are you using. I don't think there's a lot of data consent either of like, am I feeding my information in and is it going to be part of the training of this model? Is it, sort of I think the co-creation and co-design does not start with just a front-end solution. I actually think it is a part of the training of a conversation model and to continue to ensure that we are not missing diverse perspectives as part of that model and subject matter expertise to validate and to effectively ensure that the model is trained correctly. So I think those are sort of the trends kind of I'm seeing in a reaction to the fast-paced environment that we are in right now with everything is AI driven and the sort of impacts that we'll have if we don't slow down a little bit and start to take care of that velocity.
Yeah. Wow, that's in some ways it's good to hear that it's being embraced and that it's being talked about, or the responsibility is at least being talked about, right? And I don't think we've gotten it yet. I don't think we have our guardrails yet as businesses and societies, but um, at least most of us, I think, know that they need to be there. So I think that's a positive. And it's interesting to hear a sector like education embracing it to the extent it is, because there are a lot of pitfalls and there are a lot of or there could be pitfalls and there could be a hands-off approach. And I think that if anything like this, it's kind of like, I started my career way back in the, you know, 1700s, it feels like. Just kidding. But like basically when the dot-com era was coming to life. And it's a little bit the same in terms of there's all this excitement and all this trepidation, and the truth is it is going to be completely different in 5 years and 10 years, and we're gonna look back and we're not gonna use AI in every sentence because it's just gonna be part of our world, right? Like, we don't say .com anymore 'cause that's old school. But it's very interesting, but and so I'm glad to see folks and companies and sectors embrace it. I'm also glad to see, some responsibility conversations happening. One thing that I, um, am cautiously optimistic about, but also very cautious about. And so both of those words are very important in this to me is the the balance of moving to solution too quickly. It's always been a problem in product management. It's always been a product and design in making good, customer focused products and not just hearing one little piece of data and jumping on a potential solution, but really understanding the problem first. And this has the potential vibe coding and, prototypes that can be spun up in 20 minutes, all of this wonderful stuff, very, very cool stuff. But it has the potential to just make that worse, right? Like, we don't have to spend a lot of time on any problem. We can just build something. Now, I have my theories on how that can actually work and be very beneficial, but I'm curious to hear your thought on how do we instill in product teams that it's still about problems, it's still about users, it's still about finding those needs and solving it. It's not about the cool new solution or the ability to build this new solution. Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There's a tendency to, especially in moving in a fast moving product environments, to jump straight into the solutioning, use those, quickly prototyping enabled tools to be able to just get something up and out. And I think it was sort of, harkening back to what I was mentioning before. I think it's a mindset shift. I think, there's kind of an expense, I think, for not deeply understanding the problem space, in my opinion. And I think that is where misalignment starts. I think, the intentionality and care that you put into deeply understanding the problems that you're solving for your user, for your business, for your stakeholders, and truly getting a um, evidence-based driven design, solution of impact, thoughtfully prioritized roadmap that includes how they might prioritize, and they, I mean your end user, your stakeholders. I, I think again, a shift into running a product management life cycle or a product life cycle. So I definitely think the foundational pieces of immersion and discovery and really understanding the problem that exists, who might affect, and what's at stake, and validating that as soon as possible before you jump into prototyping and releasing. It could be an incremental, again, small change. And I think that a lot of times in larger product teams, I've noticed this because I've been a part of that, is that research is undervalued. It sometimes is usually thought as just testing and user experience testing, UXR, and it's much more nuanced, and it starts much sooner, and it comes with many different mixed modalities. Generative design, evaluative testing, a lot of the mixed message methods that I had mentioned before. And it usually is the piece that is cut out. How do we close the, testing cycles? How do we remove that? Because we need more time for design. We need more time for development. And I think it needs to become more of a integrated practice. And it does require advocacy and a mindset shift. So I do think that, and where I try to do my best to support and become an advocate for that is including it into my project plan and my product roadmap plan, where we're doing it and we'll see what happens, right? Like, I will advocate for that, and we'll find a way to move quick. We'll find a way to meet that timeline. We'll do it in a crafty way. We'll start with thoughtful recruitment of existing customers. We'll spike in doing some desk research. So we can do some asynchronous collaboration as well. So I think it becomes crafty, but I do feel like it is a mindset shift from not wanting to move so quickly in a fast paced prototype release to really understanding that value. And I think you'll see that value as you start moving through that cycle, become part of the fiber of how you view um, the way of thinking about your product, and the value of research is part of that.
Yeah, that's really spot on. I think I think you touched on virtually everything that I am feeling and seeing and thinking about this issue, or potential issue or opportunity. I think it's both of those. And that is using it as co-creation, right? Back to the kind of start of the conversation. And I think it's a really powerful way to practically do that now. That more teams will have the opportunity to potentially do that with real users, but we still have the potential to bias that because we're, literally showing them a solution in the beginning or, too quickly in some cases, as opposed to just digging into the problem a little bit more. Now, if we've done that and then we get to the solution and we can go through really rapid, feedback cycles, that's awesome and that's amazing. And I hope that that happens and continues to happen. It just is, it can end up being just another thing that forces us into biasing our users and biasing our feedback and almost forcing this internal view. So I'm a big proponent of it. I actually think it's wonderful, and I think it will end up changing the way we do work in product. But I also think that the best teams are the ones who stick with the idea and that we're still just problem solvers, and that the word is problem first, and then we go solve it. And so, yeah, so it's great to hear your perspectives on this. We've talked a little bit about both of these, but I would love to just kind of cap this part of the conversation with what do you see the biggest opportunities are for AI in product teams generally, education sector specifically if you want, or just generally, and then kind of the flip side, what are the potential pitfalls of that?
Yeah, I think, like, specifically for product management and the introduction of AI and all of the tools that we use and the way that that's sort of shaping and shifting that role. And I think it's not just with product management. I think it's with any role in technology. And I think also it's with any role of a teacher using a product that includes AI. And I think that what that does is sort of transform a little bit of the focus of your job, your role, to be able to kind of reinvest the time savings that AI can provide you through either automation, optimization, and a lot of teacher facing products. It's, child and classroom data. It's assessment data that can provide suggestions to what sort of in classroom curriculum you should do next, right? That is the time savings. So what happens with that time that you have? It opens, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn something new, to more intentionally give face time to your class or a teacher, for example. Think about different ways of expanding for a product manager. An upskill for you. What if you learn a new delivery framework? What if workshop facilitation became a big part of your role? You have now the ability to take all of that time off your plate of doing sort of the, risk management and the future casting. And what if that became storytelling? What if that part of that time savings, well, again, opened up an opportunity for you to upskill and to use that time thoughtfully and expand your role to go deeper into maybe a craft. For me, it was design and research, right? It was the ability to sort of flex because now I'm able to kind of free up my time and learn more about that craft, to be an interpreter of what AI is providing me, but have the discernment to have that strategic thinking and to be able to bring that into context and a vision. And I think that is the opportunity that we're seeing. Again, it's across, I think, the board for a lot of different roles in technology, a lot of different places in which AI is becoming an automator of tasks, of things that we used to do as busy work. So what does that time saved give you? And I think that's kind of an open-ended question, but I do think for product management, there's so much at our disposal to go deeper into a specific concentration area and learn more. And again, for me, I think that storytelling ability and the future casting and the articulation of a vision to keep it in focus is something that I don't think an AI tool can do for us, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I see it as a value add if used in the right way.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I love, love, love that perspective, and I'm hoping that's what happens, right? I am hoping that because again, we've complained for a long time that product teams or product managers become, you know, task masters and order takers from internal stakeholders, and we've been complaining about it for a long time about how so much of our work becomes tactical, even though we're supposed to be strategic leaders of the product and the product vision. Hey, this is it, right? This is our
Is it?
and so let's see if put our money where our mouth was and see if we actually take advantage of this because I agree 100% there. So, I think my final ish question for you is thinking about um thinking about product managers. We've talked a lot about how product managers, product teams, people that are in a role today can get a little bit better. Just do things a little bit better from an AI perspective, design perspective, human centered. I have a soft spot for aspiring product managers. Obviously, I teach at Johns Hopkins and love, my students who want to eventually be product managers. I founded a company about how to bridge those gaps between aspiring product managers and companies. It's hard to be a new product manager. There's a lot of chatter in the market today that says there will be no more APMs and junior PMs, and that we don't need those anymore. I personally don't believe that. I believe it is a role of some sort that we as organizations should create and and frankly, kind of build our pipeline of amazing product talent from the ground up. With that said, if you were talking to an aspiring product manager, and so maybe that's somebody who's already working but newer in their career and maybe wanting to pivot into product management. Maybe it's somebody in university wanting to start in product management or get into product management early in their career. What kind of advice would you give that person?
Yeah, I think there is so much amazing content out there right now to help ground and shape the Uh, just the different ways you can apply product management. There are specialty roles now, product management, AI product management. I was just reading a bunch of articles about how there's now a specific set of courses just on product management and AI. So do that research. Start broadening your spectrum and scope. What you learn about the fundamentals of product management will always be there. But how are you starting to maybe think a little bit more broadly about the possibilities of potentially going narrow or specifically in a sector or a domain that you really like and enjoy? Do that research and broaden your ability to understand different perspectives and different frameworks. It's something that I've really enjoyed. It's brought a new way of looking at product management that I didn't think was possible. And I think that will be a value add as you start to interview. Having a framework or perspective or something that you've learned that is not just product management, but is in design or in research. I also think keep your eyes out for internships for where you can be a part of a product team where you are learning on the ground. I think that is an invaluable experience that I had of understanding my personal touch to product management. It is such a human connection role. You are not only orchestrating the timeline, the tasks but also the human science of it, the behavioral science of a team, and the interpersonal. That is just important. Understand and embody that, and try to expose yourself to do as many internships as possible. I know this market is tough. It really is. Reach out to those who you are seeing, provide voices in this space, grab coffee. Would love to connect with as many people as possible to be able to share my advice and guide and support. So, yeah, continue to educate and expand your view of what product management can do. Think about different disciplines that you can go deep into to broaden how you might be able to bring that to a table to an interview. Explore internships as you can. Keep your eyes open for that and connect with people on LinkedIn. Those would be the advice I have for folks.
I love it. I love it. That's amazing advice, and I echo all of that. And it's people like you who give back a little bit of their time. Having this conversation and allowing us to record it and put it out on Product Voices, and offering time for coffee chats. Those are the things that when you look back on your career, you realize that those things happened, and maybe it was once a year, once a quarter, that you met someone that just gave you a little bit of a glimpse, a little bit of a spark at the time you needed it. And so it's so important. And again, I applaud you for what you do, not only here but elsewhere. So Amanda Didio, thank you so much for joining me. It was an amazing conversation. Loved having you, and thanks again for sharing all of your wisdom.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was such a pleasure. And yeah, I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Amanda. And thank you all for joining us on Product Voices. Hope to see you on the next episode.